Okay, so this video is going to talk about the jointer and the planer all in one. When we talk about this in class, we will discuss a process for taking a board that is rough. In this case, it's just a 2x6, but that it works for construction lumber, which might not be flat and square, or with rough hardwood as well. And it's going to make it so that it has 4 flat faces, and that those edges and faces are completely perpendicular, 90 degrees to each other. When we're talking about a board here, the wider face of this is what we're going to call the face. The shorter face is what we're going to call an edge of a board. So when we're using the jointer, we'll talk about face jointing and edge jointing a board. In between there, we'll go over to the planer and get parallel sides. We'll talk about how a jointer and a planer work in class, but this video is just going to cover the safety aspects. So on the jointer, we always want to make sure that we're going to set our fence before we start, or at least check our fence. We don't want this fence to be all the way back if we're not jointing something that wide. So we'll bring it a little bit closer like I have here, and we'll double check that this fence is actually 90 degrees. Use a square or something like that. We need to make sure that our blade guard here is in place, working correctly. We're never going to pull that blade guard out unless that we are in some way working on this, and that's going to be something that I'm going to be the only one doing. Anytime you would need to work on that cutter head, we need to make sure that this tool is turned off in 2 separate ways. So completely off, emergency stop pressed in, probably even turning the breaker off if I'm actually touching the cutter head on this tool. So I'll go ahead and turn that back on. First thing we're going to talk about here is PPE, personal protective equipment. As with anything, we need to have our safety glasses on when we're working in the shop, closed-toed shoes, and really watch out for those dangling things, necklaces, loose sleeves. This cutter head is a lot bigger than the table saw blade, and there is no way this thing is going to stop if it touches you or if something gets sucked in that's attached to you. So we need to be really careful about that. Because of that, we will never be face jointing a board. If we're going through this flat way like this, we're never going to be face jointing a board with our hands. That is just way too close. With any of these tools in the shop, we want that hands width away. If I can't maintain that hands width, because I've got a flat little board here and my hand will only be 1.5 inches away, we're not doing that. We always, always, always need to be using push blocks. Here, one of these is always going to have these little hooks on the bottom. That's going to help push that board forward, and the front one is just to help hold that board down. So when we're doing this, I'm going to leave the tool off here for a moment. We're going to be pushing this through, feeding it into the cutter head at a nice slow rate. At this point, my pressure is down on the board and forward. As this board goes across the cutter head, I need to switch where I'm putting pressure. I don't want to keep pressure down on this in-feed side of the table. I need to put the pressure down on the out-feed side. And this backhand is just pushing forward now. That's how this planer is actually, or this jointer is actually going to create that flat surface. So pushing down here, pushing forward here, and I'm going to finish the cutout, let this blade guard go all the way closed, and turn off the tool. Then I can go ahead and check to see if I've done a good enough job on that first one or if I need to run another pass. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. Normally we'd have the dust collector on, but to make the video very hard to hear if I do that. Well, let's go ahead and do this. When I turn this on, you see a light right there. I'm going to push this through. At this point, I'm shifting my weight back front in, all the way through. That blade guard closed, and I'm turning off my tool. And you can see here, I've made progress on this. I've cut down the edges here. This inside wasn't touched, so I need to keep going until that whole surface has been machined away. I'm not going to do that right now, just to keep this video short. Our next step would be to go over to the planer. I'll talk about the planer in a second. But when we come back and do our second joining pass, we're going to be doing an edge jointing pass. So one of those flat surfaces up against the fence, and here's where we are going to be using our hands. I'm not going to have enough support here to use these tools, and so I need to use my hands to push this piece through. Now in this case, there's my hand width. I need to keep my fingers up on this top part here. So I'm using this hand to push it up against the fence. That's my reference surface now. This hand in the back is pushing forward, and what I'm doing with my fingers here is I'm putting my thumb just a little bit below, kind of grabbing that first knuckle on my finger so that I know my finger back here is not going to go down towards that blade at all. It's got to stay right up on that corner. Other than that, the same kind of rules apply. As I start here, I'm going to push it into the cutter, and once I get ahead, I'm going to start pushing down on this side and forward on this side. What I always want to be thinking about here is, if at any point my hand hits that red blade guard, I need to stop. That is way too close to those spinning cutters. If my hands do not hit the blade guard, then I'm in good shape, as long as I'm keeping my pushing finger here nice and up. I'm keeping that shape of my hand so that it can't go anywhere. Grabbing that first knuckle of my thumb to keep it in place. So let me show you that. Pushing up against the fence and forward and back. Shifting my pressure to the front and all the way through. And then just like before, I would need to check that edge. A lot of times you'll see people putting a pencil mark on there. Once the pencil is all gone, we know that edge is straight. So the next step we're going to do here is go over to the planer and show you how that works and what safety considerations we have there. Okay, so now we're over here at the planer. The reason this is included in the jointer video is because we will never, ever, ever be using this planer before we've got a straight, flat face on the jointer. We're always going to joint a flat face first, plane the opposite face, go back and joint an edge, and then we'll go to the table saw to rip the final edge off. So you can see here from the last video I've created, as you probably can't see, I've created a flat edge there. That is my reference surface. It is always going to go down flat on the table. I need to make sure that my depth of cut is not too much. It's always a good idea to measure your stock. Mine is measuring here just about 1.5 inches at its thickest point. So I'm going to make sure that I have it set to 1.5 inches for the first pass. It might not take anything off, but we'll just adjust it from there. And then each time I go to make a new pass, either to just get it flat or to bring it down to whatever thickness I want, I'm going to make sure that I'm only ever going down by about 1/16 of an inch. So 1/16 of an inch is going to be 2 turns on the crank, or if you're using the guide here, we can go 0.0625. That's going to be 1/16 of an inch. We never want to go farther than that. And if you're working with something hard, like hard maple, in a woodworking class, we might even want to go less than that. When we are feeding our stock in, 2 big concerns we have is that our hands do not get into the machine. There's a line right here on this table where the 2 pieces of cast iron meet. Your hand should never, ever, ever go past that line. The second concern we have here is right here. If you are holding a board up, when it gets grabbed by that machine, it is going to slam down to that table. So right there is a big pinch point that will hurt your fingers if your fingers are in there. Other than that, this machine is pretty safe to use. Inside the machine, we've got these right here are called anti-kickback pawls, and they will help prevent the wood from shooting back at you. A lot of lower end planers do not have that. We do. We still don't want to be standing right behind the board, pushing it through. We're going to stand off to the side just in case, but that's not as much of a problem here. And then as long as we're following our safety mindset, we're keeping our safety glasses on, we're thinking about our PPE, our loose dangly things, so nothing can get pulled inside that machine, we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and power on the machine. Normally we would have the dust collector going. So I'm going to hit the main motor switch. That turns everything on. I'm going to feed this in. I'm not going to put my hands down there. I'm just going to feed it in. You can see it's not making a cut at all. That's okay. At this point, I can either take 2 turns on my handle, get it to lock in. So 1, 2, and then repeat. So I'll repeat that. Now you can hear it making a cut. The other end, I'll grab the piece, bring it back around, and I need to make another adjustment. Another way to do this is to hit this plus minus button and say I want to go minus 0.0625. Hit enter. And when I hit start, it's going to automatically adjust for my next cut. I'm going to guess most of you are going to use the hand wheel, that's okay. I'll use my board for another round. So that's the planer. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. On this planer, there is no off switch. It's not a great design. We're just going to do a light tap on the emergency stop, and that will turn off the tool. If you ever tried to use this tool and it doesn't want to turn on, check that emergency stop hasn't been tripped.